In the 6th Age, what comes to mind when you think of Sears Village? Maybe you stop by the Forester's Arms pub for a chill beer and a chat with the local coal truck depot employees coming off a long day's work. Maybe you descend down into the courthouse and involve yourself in some of the local politics, using your skills of deductive reasoning to decipher the truth of the claims. Maybe you need a moment of silence to clear your mind and unburden your soul as you sit on the church pews in the holy establishment of Sardaman. Or maybe you help keep the village prosperous, working in the flax fields or felling the many number of exotic trees found in the area. All in all, it is a quiet life, filled with peace and solitude. But was it always that way? Early in the 5th Age, when the races of Gielinor were stumbling across new discoveries left and right still, one such discovery made its way into the limelight. Deep underground, explorers were excavating rock and sediment from this rich and resourceful location, hoping to expand Sears Village economy and attract a stable working-class society and usher in a new hub of activity. On the western side of this cavern, a miner got more than he bargained for. While striking a huge rock, the miner's pick broke as the rock unfurled and transformed into an earth elemental. Before the elemental could smash the innocent with a clubbing blow, the residual water doused the miner in a violent surge as a powerful water blast spell whizzed by his head, striking the beast in its core and crumbling it to the ground. The miner looked back and gave the mage a nod, thankful for his protection as he began rummaging through the rubble. His body froze, and he had to catch his breath. With a shaking finger, he turned to his superior. Sir, I think we have just found the elemental ore." The commander rushed back up the mineshaft, yelling, gleeful with joy. But things are just getting started. In the aftermath of the discovery, the location was converted into the workshop, as renowned and prestigious individuals from all types of fields and disciplines flocked to the site to study and conduct experiments on the new ore. None, though, had any success like that of the metallurgist Vitruvius and his apprentice. Together, through a series of tests, they perfected the art of priming the metal to unlock its full potential. In an excerpt from the Beaten Book, or Book of the Elemental Helm, found within the exam center at the Verrock dig site, it reads, "Some years following the original discovery of the elemental ore, further investigation was performed by a metallurgist called Vitruvius in collaboration with a freelance mage. Over the course of 2 years, they did many tests on the ore and refined metal, aiming to optimize the process by which the metal was extracted from its impure ore. From the data they gathered, they discovered the optimum temperature and carbon-ore ratio for the production of elemental metal of the highest quality. The quality of the resulting metal was assessed on the basis of its ultimate tensile strength, hardness, as compared to a standard diamond-tipped probe, as well as magical absorption capacity per unit mass, grain size, and elastic deformation modulus. Their most significant discovery in this period, however, was the novel technique of priming the ore. From here on out, things are going to take a bizarre turn. The text continues. At the time, the significance of priming was not fully appreciated. However, the records kept by Vitruvius state that his apprentice, in an unsuccessful attempt to animate a small ingot of elemental metal as part of a student prank, accidentally instilled his entire consciousness into the primed ingot. An unfortunate side effect of this process was to reduce the apprentice's body to a dead shell. Attempts to return his consciousness to his body were regrettably unsuccessful. Vitruvius discovered that the mental energy was firmly bound to the elemental metal, that no dissipation was detectable. Similar experiments with unprimed bars initially yielded comparable results, but the mental energy quickly left the bars and dissipated within such a short period that no practical application seemed feasible. However, the primed elemental metal showed considerably more promise. After much trial and error, it was time for Vitruvius to come at this from a different perspective. He had made some progress in mind transference, but its limitations were apparent. Now he wanted to direct his attention to the apprentice's physical remains. Located on a bookcase in the Sears Village Church lies the Ragged Book, or Book of the Elemental Body. An excerpt reads, "The movement of the assistant's consciousness to the primed metal bar obviously had an effect on Vitruvius. Rather than research the primed metal any further, he resolved to return thought and life to the still body that sat in the corner of his workshop. Attempts to reverse the priming process were unsuccessful. The primed metal bar was resilient and impervious to any experimentation. Frustrated, Vitruvius turned his attention to the magical powers of the body, as found in the body runes of the world. Using a modulated version of the priming machine, coupled with intricate clockwork, he perfected a method of artificially replicating the energy. It became clear from an early stage that even a small output of body energy required a machine of an unwieldy size. Further revisions to the machine increased this size, yet Vitruvius was still only able to bring a single limb to life. To compound his frustration, the body energy caused the arm to react violently, flailing and tearing at the assistant. Vitruvius had little choice but to amputate it and store it safely away. Having made a soft clay mold of the limb in a temporary effort to rearm his assistant, Vitruvius resolved to investigate every nook and corner of magic to return his assistant to a semblance of life. Again, Vitruvius's attempts have been unsatisfactory, although he remains resolutely determined to find a way. Then, the light bulb goes off in his head, and a saying he used to tell his other colleagues comes to the forefront. Your ideas must be sharp and keen like a blade. Put your nose to the grindstone, and the edges of that idea will begin to form. He was going to use the cosmic energy, and he had a prototype ready. On a bookcase found in the Sorcerer's Tower on the first floor is the location of the Notched Book, or Book of the Elemental Gloves. Its text reads, Indeed, it wasn't too long after the body machine proved unsuccessful that Vitruvius set about creating his next device, one that generated energy akin to that of cosmic magic. He hoped that the state-changing effects cosmic magic caused in other magically receptive objects could be used to change the state of an inanimate object based upon its form. Vitruvius set about constructing a cosmic energy matrix. The matrix consisted of pillars that each contained a number of precious gemstones, which had been ground into focusing lenses on the workshop's newly installed whetstone. Through these pillars, the four base elements were passed in such a way as to generate vast amounts of cosmic energy. It was an expensive proposition that required Vitruvius to sell off much of his property, but he was so stoically determined to return his apprentice that money was no object. After the previous failed experiment with his apprentice's body, Vitruvius decided this time to first create a dedicated test subject, a prototype shell built from the primed elemental metal. Unfortunately, his own expertise lay in metallurgy, not human anatomy. And so his prototype didn't turn out exactly human-shaped, but it worked. The cosmic energy turned the lifeless lump of metal into a walking, talking being, though one without a soul. Vitruvius named it Da-V, inspired by something that an old artist friend of his had once drawn. With the prototype working, he set about building a second elemental shell, but this time using the elemental metal in which his old apprentice resided. He figured that the boy's consciousness, which was held within the metal, would bring back his old apprentice, albeit in a different form. Finally having success in reanimating his apprentice, granted not in the form they would have liked, the two were content with the results. Vitruvius could now refocus his efforts back to the original task at hand, the effects magic energy had on the elemental metal. This time, he was ready for his magnum opus, using chaos magic. Laying on a table in the lowest depths of the workshop, you can find the shabby book, or Book of Elemental Boots. It reads, with Vitruvius's experiments with cosmic energy proving to be a success, and his old apprentice on hand to help out with a more menial task, he threw himself back into his research of the effects magic energy had on the elemental metal, this time using chaos magic. His plan was to construct a machine through which he could give the mindless Da-V simple instructions, something that his previously flesh and blood apprentice still seemed incapable of. Inspired by the likes of the golems and the rune guardians he'd heard about to the east, Vitruvius used chaos energy to construct a machine to feed instructions to his new, non-sentient mechanical worker. His newly crafted cosmic gloves proved to be a necessary insulation against the machine's chaotic power. From a combination of simple inputs, he devised a way to give the automaton complex instructions. From simplicity came wonderfully chaotic complexity. Others who saw this machine thought it a wonder of the modern age, though some, perhaps reacting more to its basis in chaotic energy, simply dubbed it a chaos engine, or simply that infernal machine. While Vitruvius had his head in his workshop building the chaos machine, his old apprentice was growing accustomed to his new cosmic-powered body. At first, he was upset that he was no longer technically human, but he still had his own memories, thoughts, and dreams, and soon landed on the thought that being a huge metallic thing was actually pretty cool. Towards the end of the chaos machine's construction, he was even back helping out his master by building programs for Da-V. It didn't take much longer for his old apprentice to prove once again that you can't teach a new cosmic-powered entity old tricks, or anything at all really. Seemingly, the boy had learned nothing from his earlier prank that landed him in this mess, and one day while Vitruvius was out of the workshop, the boy was tinkering with the chaos machine. Let's just say that he entered a program he shouldn't have. There were tears and regret on both sides, and words were said. Unbeknownst to either of them at this time though, the boy had accidentally imbued his cosmic shell with chaos energy. The consequences of this would soon become apparent to them both. Yes, indeed the consequences would be swift. As greater and more powerful items were created, the Magi of the time recognized the threat this posed and closed down the workshop, binding it under lock and key and doing their best to destroy all knowledge of the manufacturing process. Alright guys, that concludes the video for today. Hope you enjoyed and see you for the next one. Later. RuneScape. Forever.